Hi, everyone. Welcome to another week of Strategy Solutions and Sanity. This show is all about showing how business can sometimes be messy and vulnerable, and sometimes you don't fail forward, but there's still some really good lessons and wisdom we can learn from our amazing guests. And this week's guest is Miss Megan Schwan. Hi, Megan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Samantha. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So, okay, for people that don't know Megan, I'm going to let you kind of share your story a little bit, but I wanted to kind of hype it up a bit and mention like Megan's one of those amazing financial people that has never made me feel like any of my questions are dumb. So I have stolen her time a few different times, and every single time we talk, I'm like in the back of my head, I'm like, this is gonna sound like such a dumb question. And you never make me feel that way. And I feel like that's such a rare gift, and I really appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Oh,
I'm really glad
yeah.
to hear that. We do strive as an organization, and me especially personally, like to not make people feel like that, because you don't know what you don't know most of the
Yeah.
time, and like what right do I have to like make somebody feel dumb, And plus, too, I think the other part is because like I'm an expert that wants people to be successful, like I want you to ask questions, because
Mm-hmm.
the more questions you ask, the more clarity you're going to get, and the more clarity I'm going to get so that I can help you. And so like I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really goofy when experts like make people feel dumb, especially like in this area with that's
Yeah.
already hard to like talk about in general, and people already have like feelings and mindsets around like money and
Mm-hmm.
finance and things like that. So I'm really honored that you feel you feel that you felt that way.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I've been
Absolutely.
able to provide that.
Yes, feel good. Give yourself a pat on the back. I
Yeah.
think like we're in similar situations. So like when I focus on, okay, how are our clients going to delegate to an assistant, or how are we going to clean up processes? I think some clients, they sometimes feel like it's the principal office with me, and they're like scared to tell me things or scared to ask questions. And I'm like, I need to know, like,
Right.
it's okay if it's a shit show. I just need to know that that's what it is so we can move forward. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, why are we holding things back? But okay,
Yeah.
let me rewind. Intro. Megan, tell us a little bit more about yourself. You've been in business for almost 12 years. Give us a
Yes.
breakdown of why you started and what you've been doing over the past 12 years.
Yeah, so the short version of this story is basically I was a teen mom, and in one of my classes in school, I had a teacher that from in accounting 101, and she just kind of poured into me, was like, you really have a knack for this. So when I got pregnant and had to figure out my career, accounting was where I went to school for that. And I went to school, I graduated, got a job. Met during that time, I met my husband at the time, got pregnant, and I decided not to go back to work full time when I had my son. And so I had to figure out like what I was going to do. I got a job as a bookkeeper at a landscaping company, and then my full-time job actually called me back. They made a part-time position because the person they hired to replace me didn't work out. So then I was working basically two part-time jobs from home, and did that for about 2 years. And then I got laid off of both of those jobs within like a month of each other. One of them got bought out, the other one needed to restructure and couldn't afford to keep me and this other person. So I was left like trying to figure out what was I going to do, because my family needed two incomes, and so I needed to work. But I was used to working at home. And so I just kind of figured I was working for that landscaping company as a bookkeeper. I had already been doing like taxes on the side for friends and family. So I guess I just had this brilliant idea to start my own thing and started networking. And here we are 11, almost 12 years later. And we serve clients across the US. I have a team of 9 employees and 2 contractors that work regularly for us. And we're
Mm.
just continuing to help businesses be successful. And in all of the midst of that, I guess you're talking about like our why, or my why, and like why we keep doing this and growing is in the midst of the 11 years, I went through a lot of different things. I got unexpectedly divorced. Oh, well, before that, I had two more babies back to back. So I have 4 children. I got unexpectedly divorced, and I moved across the country with my kids. And my business helped to support all of that. It was the conduit that was able to give me options to be able to take care of my family and put them in the best positions. And so that really is the driving passion now behind what we do, is we help business owners grow their businesses, be more strategic, understand their numbers so they can make better decisions to be successful and sustainable, but ultimately so that they also have options. We work with a lot of minority and women-owned businesses that are usually undereducated and under-supported. And that's the passion behind what we do and why we keep driving forward. So,
Man, there's a lot of chaos that can happen over a decade. What's cool though is it sounds like you kind of grew up with the business. Like your
yes,
business matured while you were also maturing and figuring
yes,
out this thing called life,
right.
right? Um, wow. Okay. And so now okay, so you moved across country. We've got 4 kiddos. What are the age ranges there?
My daughter is 19, and then I have a 13-year-old and a 6 and 7-year-old, although they're going to be 7 and 8 here in the fall shortly.
The chaos, I mean, the fun and love, but also the chaos
Yes,
that still exists in your house. I'm right there. I mean, I'm not right there with you. I don't have 4 kiddos. I've got a 5 and 3-year-old. Sometimes it does feel like they've quadrupled
I
and
know.
they're everywhere. But I also I really appreciate what you're saying about the why here. Like I remember when my mom joined my team, and now it wasn't just like a, oh well, I want to have options for me, but now it's like, okay, well, I want to make sure this grows, and like because now my why includes her, and now my why includes my
Right.
kids and all those things. And then
Yes.
being able to have that empathy with clients as well, of like, I see the things you're going through. I promise you,
Right.
I've seen dark stuff too. We're gonna
Yeah.
figure it out together. So
Yeah.
how did that really feel for you? Like, okay, we're maturing, we're still figuring out life. We're kind of an adult, but sometimes we don't feel like an adult. And now we've got 2 more kids in the mix that happen kind of halfway through
Yeah.
the business growth so far. How did that feel?
It's been a really interesting but great experience, I would say. Like when I started my business, I didn't have the greatest like self-esteem. Like that was something I had struggled with since I was a teenager, and I think my business though, it really helped me boost that. Like I was able to show up. I had people who were like way more successful like on the outside than I was listening to me, and just like
Mm,
seeing me as the expert. And so like I think there was like a whole level of confidence that came. I was also I will still kind of am a little bit more introverted, but you have to network, you have to talk to new people. So like just like growing as an individual, like my business helped me significantly with that. And then adding team members, you have to be a leader, and you have to show up and you have to have hard conversations and you got to be strategic and mindful and like all these different characteristics if you want to be successful and build a really good culture. And I'm really proud to say like we've got employees that have been with me through almost the beginning, so like
wow.
10, 11 years that they've been on my team, and they love it. They are, because I've been able to foster this culture and within our organization that really helps to support them as individuals and their families as well, which is really special. Like a lot of times we hear like, I've never worked for any place like this, like you're the best boss. Like I sometimes it's hard to say it because I'm not really the type of person to like boast, but at the same time, like I
Mm,
want to step in and acknowledge that as well. And I think that's really the beauty of being able business owners, that you can create what maybe you haven't experienced yourself, or create what you
mm.
envision in terms of like your culture and your team and how all of that works. So I've had to grow as a person, still am very much going through like growth as a person. But it's been a really rewarding journey, and really, I think, special, because I don't think it would have happened unless I had my business, so that's been
Yeah.
really cool. So
I know you said you don't like to boast, but it's awesome to see like how much fulfillment, and we could just
yeah.
feel that in like how you're describing this. That's awesome. Now you mentioned one of or some of these employees of the 9 that you have been with you since that like 10-year, like
Mhm.
for 10 years ish, right? So they joined about a year or two into you being in business. Now a lot of service-based business owners are not hiring in
Yeah.
that first year or two. And at that point you had 2 kids. So
Mhm.
what was like the trigger point for you of like, okay, yeah, we need to bring someone on?
Yeah, I guess for me, because I actually during that first year, I went back and got like a part-time job at a school for like a year as well. So like in that interim, I had brought on a contractor to kind of just like help me with like data entry stuff. So like real basic stuff. And it was because that stuff usually takes longer amounts of time. And I just couldn't do everything, right? It was kind of like at that point where it was like I needed my job. So I had that steady stream of, income coming in, but at the same time I needed help in the business. And so like for me at that time, that was kind of what worked. And I guess the other caveat to that is it was my sister. So like she also needed something.
Okay.
So like it was kind of like helping her out, her helping me out kind of a thing. But after that year, I got to a place where it was like, I have to choose. Like I was spending 20
Mm.
hours working for somebody else. And I knew at that point, like what it would take. Like I knew if I hit the ground and was like networking and prospecting and all that, like I was going to be able to bring on enough clients to replace that income. But it was that calculated risk. Like I wasn't quite there, but I knew if I spent that time on my business, I could get there really fast. And that is what ended up happening. So I ended up quitting that job and I've been full-time in my business since.
Wow. The interesting thing that caught my ear there was that you said calculated risk. And
Yeah.
my cyber stalking, I think I saw you had a post of, or you mentioned that you don't, like, it's not about helping clients avoid risk. It's about helping them make smarter, like,
Yes.
risk choices, I think. And I'm probably butchering the language you used in that post, but kind of break that down. Because also I'm curious here, because most introverts are not risky people.
That
But
is
you speak about calculated risk with a level of groundedness and confidence there. So break
yeah.
that down for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've actually never been asked this perspective, I guess. So this is the first time explaining this from my perspective. So yes, I am an introvert in some respect. I would say I'm kind of like in the middle. I'm not like super extroverted, but I'm not fully introverted either. But regardless, I think for me, the the thing is that even though I'm an introvert, I'm a business owner. I'm a visionary. I have like the dream and that push and that drive. I've always been an overachiever. Even like at that full-time job that I had, I'd run out of work. They sent me in the back to like count inventory because I would be fast, about getting things done. So I've always been that person, despite being an introvert. So I think that is probably part of why risk doesn't completely like scare me. But the other part too is I think when you're a business owner, like risk has to be part of what you embrace. Like you can't grow, you can't scale, you can't grow as a person, right? We got to get out of our comfort zones in order to grow as individuals and as leaders and as business owners and grow our business. So I think that's a big part of it too, is like risk is risk because it's uncomfortable. It's it's something we're not used to doing. It's maybe something that's a little bit against the norms, right? Or something maybe that we don't feel like we're ready for. Like I think that's kind of like the definition of risk, right? When we're talking about what risk means.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need to embrace that as a business owner. And then the calculated part is incredibly important. Like you have to weigh the pros and cons because every risk is not going to be a beneficial risk, right? And sometimes like there are risks that you take and you fail, and that's okay because you can learn a lot in failure. But you also want to be thoughtful about the moves that you make as a business owner as well, because it can often impact a lot of other things or people or whatnot. So when I say calculated risk, like I mentioned, like I had already known how much time I was spending on getting sales. I kind of knew like the conversations that I needed to have, the number of conversations I needed to have. So like I already had some numbers like attached to some of those things. So for me, it was like if I took that 20 hours and did, all of the things that I knew are going to bring in sales, that I was going to be able to bring on those clients. Cause I knew like in 20 hours, I can have 100 conversations or whatever it was, and be able to convert 20 of those conversations and be able to make up the income that I was leaving. So it's really important to like put some thought, put some data behind decisions, especially like big decisions like that. And that's what I mean by like calculated. but it needs to be a little bit of a risk too, because it's not guaranteed, right? It wasn't guaranteed that even
Mhm.
if I did all those right things, I was going to get those clients, right?
Yeah.
So it was
Oh my
still like
gosh.
an element of risk to it, but at the
Mhm.
same time, like I knew the data behind that decision as well. And I think you have to have a little bit of both. Like you got to have some intuition, you got to have a little bit of that data, but at the end of the day, you got to just like be determined, I think, is like the other aspect of that. Like you got to be determined to make it work. And that's kind of where I was at. I was like, I wanted to be back home with my kids. And as a matter of fact, right as I was quitting that job, my son, who was, I think he was 3 at the time, he broke his femur. So like I quit my job. I was like on my 2 weeks notice. So it was like God had perfect timing, because it was like I didn't have to worry about like calling into work. I could work from home. But he was in an almost full body cast for 7 weeks. And so it was just like it was crazy like timing, but it worked, it worked out.
Oh
And
my
sometimes like
gosh.
that's part of it too.
Yes. Sometimes God is like, you thought you had a plan? Let me show you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, some really interesting things there. And it's so interesting. Like when we talk about whenever someone brings up risk, I always think of like how I do not like to gamble. I remember like my husband took me to some casinos in South Dakota, and we're at like not like a dive hotel, but like
Yeah.
it's just kind of like in the kind of ish in the middle of nowhere. And there's like $1 blackjack table, and I'm like, okay, this is awesome. Like let's go, or like craps or something. This is cool. And then like we went across the street to another table, and they're like, it's a $5 buy-in, and I was like, immediately no. That's way too much risk for me. Like,
Right.
no, right? But what's also interesting there is like I'm kind of like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. So with other people, with my clients, I'm like, yeah, let's look at these metrics. We'll make it not scary, but we got to
Yeah.
look at this data to make these decisions. And then my husband, who is a little bit riskier, he is also still very data focused. So he'll ask me some questions about like certain metrics in my business. I'm like, why are you attacking me? Like, why are you asking me things? Like, but okay. Toward the end there, you also mentioned that having that intuition with the risk, right? So
Yeah.
we've got this data so we can make informed decisions, but there's some level of intuition there. So can you
Yeah.
expand on that a little bit? Like, is that you like we're taking things in prayer? Is this just like gut feelings? What
Yeah.
is that allows you to then say, I'm ready to take this step?
Yeah. For me personally, there is a lot of prayer because my faith is a big, strong part of my being and who I am as well. But I think in addition to that is that we often just don't trust ourselves enough. So I was actually talking to a client about that, and we've been working through her numbers and her profit first uh process and implementation that she and system that she has in her business. And like sometimes the numbers aren't super black and white, right? Like because there are things that come up and there's unexpected things in ahead. And she was just really having a hard time with like trying to make a decision. And I was just like, we've set up this system, the system is working. And I'm like, and your business, like she's been in business for like 8 years. And I'm like, you have to be okay with like trusting that what thoughts you're having. Like she wanted to make an adjustment on an allocation, and move some things around. And I'm like, do it. I'm like, because you're the one that knows your business at this point. And even though you might not like be able to tie back the logic to, whatever that thought is, a lot of times like that thought is valid because there's so many like subliminal things that we take in right on a daily basis. And I think that's part of it too, is like we know our business, we know our clients, we know our services, we know our packages. When we start setting up systems, we can see things that on the surface level we can't always like explain. But you know what I'm saying? Like when systems get set up in our business, like they start doing what they're supposed to do, which is like make things more clear, like less chaotic. And I think because of that, we get more clarity, even when we can't tie it back to logic or like exactly like pinpoint what that is. We start to see things as business owners intuitively, which I guess is that intuition where we can make decisions, even though we maybe we might not be able to tie it back to something that's black and white. So I guess that's kind of what I'm saying
Mm.
about intuition. And I don't know if that made sense or not, but like
It
there's
does.
something that
I'm
happens.
following.
Yeah. There's something
I,
that happens when you've been a business owner for a long time, and you start to really understand your business, and then you set these systems up to like kind of reinforce what you know, or like clarify what you know. And that's why it's so important to set those things up. Like I know you know that, being like in the operations, like you start setting up systems and your business starts working better, you know. And
it's like it's
got it.
kind of like how we as moms, like we could
Yeah.
look at our kids sometimes and they could be making what other people would assume is like no facial expression. They could be doing
Yes.
nothing, and but we are
Yes,
like we're tuned
exactly.
in, like,
Yes.
oh, I know something's about to happen,
Yeah, that's a great
and
analogy. Yes, it's
yeah.
exactly like that. Like you can't explain it, but because you know it so well, and you know like the processes and this, like your kids, like their tendencies, and their reactions, and like a lot of times like what their thought process is behind, like, so it's the same thing with business. Like you might not be able to pinpoint it exactly, but because you know it, because you set up the systems to catch flags before they become issues, that's what gives you that power and that intuition to be able to make those risky decisions, because there's an element of knowledge you have, even if you can't like quantify it. And that's
Yeah.
the really cool part, I guess, about
Yeah.
being
Well,
able to like dig more into your business.
I think you and I have a similar thing here because we're in like the vulnerable side of people's businesses, right? Like we are
Yeah.
there to support and help them clean up so they can go shine, right? Whether that's with
Hmm.
numbers or it's delegation and ops. And what's interesting with clients when we're in that position is they oftentimes can't find the words. And it sounds like
Yes.
that's kind of the position you're in as well, of like,
Yeah.
how do I help this person move forward when they know the answer, but they don't have the words for the answer,
Yes.
right? And it's like,
Yeah.
we're on the
Exactly.
same page, though. We just don't know what that page looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, so also when you were breaking down like why you were able to take this calculated risk, you also said that not only do you have the intuition and data to make the decision, you then had this level of determination to make it work.
Yeah.
Where does that stem from? Did that stem from, not to get like too messy here, unless you want to get messy, I can roll
Sure.
with it. But like, did that stem from, okay, like, hey, we're getting divorced. This is a clean start. We're going to like make things happen. Did that stem from like, I'm a mom, I'm strong? Like, where is that really coming from of like, I'm determined?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I think, just kind of being like having a personality of being a overachiever, or like a perfectionist in some ways, as like a person. So like my personality, I guess, kind of just like drives to like being successful, right? But I think the other part of it is because there's been opportunities, right? Like especially when I first got divorced, like I had the thought of like, maybe it would be easier to just like go get a job, right? Versus like trying to run a business. But for me, like one thing that's been able to create like that grit, and determination to just like keep going no matter what, is because the pros for me outweigh the cons, So like with having my own business, even though it's like more than I've ever worked in my whole life, trying to running a business, and you're on like almost all the time, right? It's hard to turn off. I've been able to have so much flexibility to provide for my family, like been there, like to take time off and to scale back. Like when I had my two youngest back to back, they were 12 months apart. So it was like baby and then baby. And I, I had to like pull back a little bit, and hire more people, but I was able to have that flexibility. And then we had COVID, and then in 2021, really, really bad. And then I'm moving across the country in 2022. Like through all of these like major life challenges, there's been so much flexibility that I've been able to take from my business, or that my business has been able to give me, I guess I should say, that like for me, it's priceless. Like I just can't imagine going back to work for somebody. And I'm like, even now it's like, well, if everything like blows up, or, we continue in this, downward trajectory that a lot of people have been feeling this year. For me, it's like, well, I'll just keep, my best clients and just keep going type of a, mindset, where it's like, I'm still not going to stop. Like, no matter what happens, like there's going to be an answer that goes even back to my business. So for me, it's just like that grit. But if you look at like successful businesses that have, achieved high levels of success, that's the same thing for them. Like you got to have like a grit and determination that no matter what happens, you're going to figure out a solution to it. And I think that's really powerful because you're able to, as the COVID word was pivot, but I like to say evolve because exactly. I don't like pivot. I think it's more evolve because as, things come up in life and business, we have to evolve. We have to either get stronger or more clear as people and individuals, or we have to adjust like to the wants and needs of our client base or whatever, type of thing. So like you have to always be like moving forward. There's countless examples of this, like Netflix versus best,
Blockbuster.
Thank you. Like Kodak and all those like all those examples that we hear all the time of not being innovative. The same is true for business. Like you have to have like this grounding of like, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to make it work and I'm going to be determined. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to get to like longevity of business. Like it has to be part of the formula to success.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. And that I think I want to do a segue here. I want to go a little off script because I think lately I've been feeling like, we are in a world that is saturated with options, right? It's part of why we see, some people like more and more like younger relationships, people not moving to marriage and people cheating and all those things. But also like in business, like you're saturated in like your software options. Like there is just, and you're saturated also in like the ways that you can innovate and the ways that you might pivot or evolve. Really just want to have like a overlay of like Ross from Friends yelling pivot. Like I can never say the word pivot without thinking about that.
Right.
But I was just thinking about this because, you mentioned Netflix and Blockbuster, and I was on Netflix the other day and I'm like, you know what? Like there's too many damn choices for me. Like I'm like, can I just have like 5 choices? And then if I don't like those, then okay, I'll walk away. But the fact that I could scroll and look forever to find that perfect TV show, it's like keeps me on the app, but then I never watch anything. And I would love to have a Blockbuster back in my life where I can go and like physically touch the DVD. And I want that for my kids too. Like, I mean, we're pretty strict with what they watch. They're 5 and 3, but I'm like, I don't need them like scrolling on the Disney app. I just want them to have like 3 physical DVDs in front of them. Okay, let me stop my rant and go back to like, do you feel that saturation? Or do you feel like your why gives you clear guardrails on how to innovate? Like, what is that bringing up for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the why is definitely important, and I do think focus is really important. Like you said, there's a lot of saturation, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of shiny pennies these days. But I think like doubling down on like the area or client or service that you want to focus on is what's helping businesses get through, this period of time. And I don't know, it could be like this forever. Another thing is like figuring out, like listening to the market, listening to your clients, networking and talking to people, I think is so important because you're able to like take things from that, right? You're able to see like, how are people talking? What are their concerns? Like what are their pain points? What are they looking for? So then you're able to nail down that focus on like what you should be focusing on and moving towards, and then just like really sticking to that. And I think another big part though too is like we have to remember that a lot of business is trial and error, and I think sometimes people get really discouraged when something doesn't work. They don't go back to the drawing board and adjust, they just kind of like give up. And now don't get me wrong, because not everybody's cut out to be a business owner. And I know some really fantastic people that operated their business for several years, like 4 or 5 years even, and they've decided to go back to a job and they're super happy doing that. So there's no shade at all if somebody is like, this isn't for me, or, I got out of my business what I wanted to get out and now I want to go back to a job. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the people that are like, this is the life I want to live and this is what I want to do and I want to create this legacy, like you have to be flexible and you have to be okay with failing. And kind of go back to the drawing board and adjust and like try again. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would just encourage, and I know I'm speaking to myself too, because it's really easy to get caught up in all of the things that's happening, and in AI, especially, and social media, and all these different like methodologies and things that people are throwing at everybody about like how to be successful and how to get sales and all this kind of thing. What I would encourage people to do, and what I've been encouraging myself to do, is to focus on like one or two things, maybe max, and just like really go hard on those for a couple of months, see if there's any traction, see if there's any results. And if not, then go back to the drawing board and try something different, because it is hard to like keep pushing forward when it doesn't feel like anything's working. The other thing too, I would encourage, and I always encourage people to do, is like, if you are having a slow season, or things have slowed down for you, go back and look at your operations, look at your services, look at like your systems that you have in place. Like, slow seasons are the perfect time to like work on your business. And too many people do not take advantage of that. And the people that do often are able to like create something new. They're able to take that evolution or that pivot to create something else. That's why there was so much success during COVID. Like, I know a lot of businesses failed, but there was a lot of businesses that had some of the best years ever in the year 2020 and 2021 and 2022 after COVID, because they took the time to like think about how they could adjust and how they could evolve as an organization. And slow seasons are that opportunity for all of us to be able to do the same thing.
I would argue that goes back to knowing your data and knowing your numbers.
Yes.
Like, when you can look at your years, year over year and quarter over quarter, you can start to see those patterns and then say, oh, okay, like, this is not a random slow season. This, like,
right.
For us, usually for us, end of Q2 is busy, and then beginning of Q3 is slow. Yes. It was swapped this year. It's a weird, this is like the buyer habits and trends have changed in 2025. So I do think some of our patterns, at least for me and my business, can't give us like as much insights this year. But typically I would know, like we're coming up on a slow period. That's okay. I know that we're going to ramp up on some marketing and some business development so we can prepare for a busy season, but then also we'll have those systems and we can kind of slow down on some projects there. But I also really appreciated your encouragements around failing and being okay with that, because I too am that overachiever personality, like grade A student. And I remember like there are times where I would just have like my fake mental breakdowns with my husband. And I'm like, why am I feeling this way? It's like, because so much of life just felt like not easy, but like I could figure it out. And then in business, there's a plethora of challenges that are not easy to solve when they're like first presented to you. And that to me always felt like, oh, I'm failing, I'm dumb, like someone else could do this, like maybe I shouldn't have a business. And my husband was just like, well, just like chill out, dude, like just take a day and think about this before you shut down. I want to jump back to something you kind of sprinkled in. And I've realized, I do this in my business, but I realized a lot of people, it's not as common as we think it is. But you mentioned profit first with one of your clients and kind of going through that. And I implemented that maybe year 2 of my business. And I think it's so smart, but I am somewhat surprised, maybe because, like I'm just like in that saturated content space, right? Of learning and development for business owners. But I'm sometimes surprised that people don't know what this is, and not shaming anyone for not knowing. But let's kind of take that time to break it down a little bit. What exactly is profit first, and like, why do you think it even matters for clients?
Yeah. A great question. And I love talking about this. So profit first is a cash flow management system and methodology. And so basically it's using people's normal behaviors and kind of leveraging their habits and behaviors. And so the way it works is that we set up different bank accounts, which act as different buckets for some of the things in business that have to get prioritized. Things like saving for taxes, paying yourself, strategically reinvesting, and planning, for the future as well. So we set up different accounts, bank accounts, to act as these different buckets. And the reason why we use bank accounts is because 75+% of business owners look at their bank account to make decisions. So they log into their bank account, they look at what they have in their checking account, and they use that information to then make business decisions. Now, there's nothing per se wrong with that. However, for most people, they forgot about that quarterly payment that's going to come out, or that annual amount that's going to come out, or, they know that they have money, or they see they have money, but payroll is going to run in a day, and then that balance is going to go down, right? So a lot of people use what we like to call bank balance accounting to run their businesses. So we lean into that habit by creating different bank accounts so that anytime income comes into your account, it gets dispersed by a percentage into these different buckets. And then you don't have to worry about something getting covered. And if you want to be able to have money for travel or professional development, you just create different accounts for that. And so the way that we work this system and figure out the percentages is we look at the last 12 months worth of expenses and basically split that into buckets. So we know what the percentages are. And the reason why we look at the last 12 months is because for most people, whatever they did last year, most of the time they can at least do that in the current year, right? So usually you can at least match what you did the year before. So it acts as like that foundation. But then we go through and we reassess that on a quarterly basis. And Mike Michalowicz is the author of Profit First and the founder of this methodology. And he has target percentages that we want to get to based off of like the most elite businesses, the top performing businesses in each of the different revenue categories. So it creates a system to manage your money. It helps to stabilize your cash flow, because instead of you waiting to pay that annual expense, you're saving a little bit each month or each, week towards that amount. Same thing for taxes. Like, most people don't save anything for taxes. They don't make quarterly estimated tax payments. And then they get to tax season and they have this huge tax bill and it's super stressful. So like, even just starting to do that, like making a bank account just for taxes, for most people, like is worth all of the stress that they've been experiencing.
Yeah. I love to find analogies for people here. And yes. The analogy that's coming up for me is, imagine that you went grocery shopping and you planned your groceries. So imagine you're like, okay, I'm going to make this for dinner. I'm going to make this for dinner. And we're going to buy all these groceries. And you put them in your fridge and your pantry. And then someone comes in. This is a little triggering because it's been recent for me. Maybe that's why I'm thinking of it. My husband comes in and he, gives some cheese to the dogs, or takes this little ingredient and uses it for that. And I'm like, I was going to make a sandwich today. I was going to do this. Right. Like, where are my ingredients? Right. And that's kind of how it feels sometimes if you're not planning out your expenses. And so let me go on a little bit of a monologue, because sometimes I hear awesome strategies on podcasts and I'm like, wait, like I want what the actual thing that you do is. And so I know you did a great job of explaining the different bank accounts. I want to give a different perspective, and I'll share what I do in my business. So we have 3 bank accounts. One of these bank accounts, you can have reserve. So it's an online bank, Bank Novo, and you can set up the different accounts in it. Okay. So for us, we have a bank that is tax savings. That is the only thing that account is for. I rarely log into it. I check the balance when we're doing like some monthly accounting reviews, but I don't even touch that account. Okay. That's not money to be used, y'all. You save it for tax stuff. Yep. And then if you have a little extra, the way my business is set up, I just kind of use that as my tax refund if I don't have to pay taxes. Okay. So then there's a checking account. And so money gets from our main online account, Novo, money goes into our checking account, and my operations manager knows what all of our expenses are, our monthly subscriptions, quarterly stuff that's coming up. All those things are on a spreadsheet for her. And so she can see, okay, this next week we have this amount coming up in expenses. Does the checking, like the operating account, have the money for this? If not, money has to go into it, right? And there's usually a certain percentage that's already set aside in a reserve to go into that. But then our online reserve has all the different things that we want. Like it'll have my payroll, it'll have like what's fun profit. Like, okay, if you want to have a cool project or some kind of cool investment, like that's what that is. It'll have like a like bonus account for myself or for team members. And so you can set this up in a lot of different ways. The point is just that there's a plan and there's percentages set up for it. So I do, not to take there, I do go a little off script from the actual book.
Yeah.
So don't do what I do if you are more a by the book person.
Yeah.
Go do what
Well,
Megan
too,
does.
yeah, that's a great point though too, and I tell people that because sometimes people do struggle with like this multiple bank accounts thing. But I always tell people like it really comes down to like your personality. Like if you're the type of person that can manage off of like a spreadsheet or like another, like I know you need a budget is like another thing that people sometimes use for that. If you can do that, that's great. But a lot of people can't. They like, and they might tell themselves they can, but they really can't. And having like
Mm-hmm.
the actual like physical different buckets in the form of bank
Mm-hmm.
accounts just kind of helps bring a little bit more clarity. Because again, like when you look at your checking account, it's one whole number. But if you have
Mm-hmm.
separate bank accounts set up, you might have one for payroll and you might have one for like the fun profit, have that account set up. And then you can see what the balance is in each of those accounts by just looking at your bank without having to look at a spreadsheet. So sometimes people like that aspect of it a little bit by having multiple bank accounts. I always tell people do what works for you. Like that's the whole
Yeah.
point is like this is setting up a system to manage your cash flow and like how it's coming in, but then also making sure that you're prioritizing profitability. Because that's kind of the other thing is like if you aren't profitable, if your business isn't bringing in enough true profit to cover your taxes and to cover your owner's
Mm-hmm.
comp, then you have an issue that needs to be solved. Maybe your pricing structure is off. Maybe your business model's wrong. Maybe you don't have or you have too many expenses that don't have a purpose and an explanation, and we dig into all the nuts and bolts of that kind of stuff. But setting up this system is kind of that first step because it's going to help you catch the issues or see the issues ahead of time before
Mm-hmm.
they become like bigger issues. And that's the
Yeah.
purpose of it is like
Yeah.
having a better handle on your money and what it is and what it's doing, and also prioritizing like what your goals are, right, as the business owner, because so many people don't pay themselves and they get burnt out, and no matter how much grit you have, if you're not making money and you're not able to pay yourself, you're going to get burnt out of your business, even if you wanted to create something that was long term, so like that part of it is really important. Your business should be working for you, not the other way
Mm-hmm.
around. And if you're an employee to your business and not an owner to your business, then something has to get adjusted, and that this system helps to kind of solve that. The other thing I think that's been really helpful for people that we've worked with is that, your monthly reports are super important. You need to make sure you're looking at those and analyzing them and asking questions related to that. But I think the hard part is like a lot of times people don't understand their reports fully, and they got to lean into that a little bit more. Profit First kind of helps bridge the gap between your reports and what happens on a day-to-day basis. And so it makes people's money more tangible. And that's a very empowering thing. And that's what we've seen a lot with the business owners that we've worked with, in setting up the
Yeah.
system and helping them work
And
with
well,
the
then they can make decisions based on like the actual cash that's
Yes.
available to them, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's the envelope system for personal
Right.
budgeting, but you're
Exactly.
doing that for your business. Like I am not allowed to make fund decisions for the business based off of what's in the operating account because that
Right.
cash is already used, right? Like even if the
Yeah.
expenses haven't hit, that cash is planned and used for.
And use, right.
And so oh man, so is there, not to put you too much on the spot because I didn't prep you for this question before, but is there like a really cool case study about someone that maybe was resistant to Profit First or just hadn't heard of it and like now they're using it and something cool that's happened for them in their business?
Well, I guess that would probably be me. So,
Perfect.
I read Profit First probably like, I think it was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And when I first read it, like I understood it and, I got it. But for me, like the multiple bank accounts thing was like a big like deterrent for me as well, because I had seen clients struggle with, having multiple bank accounts. And, I just thought it was messy and, all that kind of stuff. So like I was really resistant to it. until I became a certified Profit First professional. And the reason why I decided to pursue that was because I had heard Mike speak again, and he was just talking about eradicating entrepreneurial poverty. And by this time, I was several years into business, and had worked with a lot of people where I saw that firsthand. Like, no matter what we, despite what we tried to help them with, people make their own decisions in their business, but a lot of times they're making them off the cuff or without that data, or without kind of like the strategic piece behind it. And so we were seeing businesses that often would be in this entrepreneurial poverty cycle, where they would be surviving month to month, and they wouldn't have tax savings put aside, and maybe they weren't paying themselves very well, their businesses weren't profitable, even though they were bringing in sales, so like we were seeing these issues, and I was like, that's right in line of what we were trying to accomplish as an organization as well. So I decided to do the certification. And as part of the certification process, you have to implement Profit First in your own business. So I went through the steps of doing that. And it was very eye-opening, like actually, because when you read the book, sometimes it does sound like that. But when you actually put it into practice, it's just like anything. Like I teach QuickBooks all the time, and we talk about chart of accounts. And I always tell people, like, you have to set up your chart of accounts to what's going to make sense for you, like as a business owner, because it's going to be what's on your reports, and it has to make sense. So same thing, like when you implement this system, like you can read it and it sounds great, or maybe it doesn't sound as great, but when you start actually putting it into practice, it becomes more tangible. Like you start to become more empowered. A lot of times, like we like to joke at the Profit First professionals, we like to joke that it becomes addicting, because making these bank accounts, because the more you make these accounts, the more empowered you feel, because now those areas are covered, because you're planning for each specific area of business that you want to be able to do. And so for me, that was kind of the case. And last year I was able to buy a home, like as a single woman in the market that we had. I was able to buy a house, for me and my kids. And I want to say that a lot of that is because we implemented Profit First, like because I really got really clear on my strategy, what I was paying myself, where my money was going, and being strategic about that. And so I would say that I'm my own case study for like being resistant to Profit First, but utilizing it and really being able to create a business that was profitable. And the other part of that too is last year was the first year in probably like 6 years that we didn't have an increase in sales, but my profit was way higher than it had been in previous years. So my profit
Yes,
is still
ma'am.
moving up. Yes. So
Oh
like,
my gosh.
it's an amazing tool. It's an amazing process and methodology and system. And any successful business has to have systems. This is the money management system that in some respects, like you were saying, Samantha, whether it's the way Samantha's doing it, or if it's just having an account set aside for reserves and taxes, even those small moves are going to make a huge difference. You got to have a money management system in your business in some way, shape, or form. I highly recommend Profit First, but I know it sometimes isn't for everybody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, pick something and start
Yeah, pick
there.
something.
And then be like, okay, it's a lot to manage this. I'm going to get Megan
Yeah,
and her team of
exactly.
9 amazing employees to
Yeah.
come do this.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Megan, I know that, I mean, you've got a teenager and a preteen, or I guess 13 is official teenager.
Yeah.
So, and I hope that all your kids can just like look up to you, but I'm guessing we maybe have some teenage angst and they don't see, or they can't let mom know how cool she is my general assumption here. But this is such a humbling and enlightening conversation, not in the way of like I'm humbled because like I'm dumb, but just like humbled in the idea of, wow, look at all Megan has been through, but also look at how awesome and cool and grounded she's doing things in business. And the fact that you're able to buy a house and you've got 4 kids and you moved across country, like that, I think is just an amazing story. And I am very grateful and appreciative that you blessed us with your time and wisdom today.
Thank you. It was a fun conversation. I've had some
Yeah.
new questions, which was super fun to answer. So thank you, Samantha.
That is always when someone tells me I've never been asked that before, the back of my head is like, oh yeah, like I
Yeah.
love that. So thank you so much for joining us, Megan.
Thank you.